thanks for joining me again, everybody. I do apologize about the missing resources off of the top of the screen. There's a lot of useful information up here, and I did continually refer to it in the video, and you obviously couldn't see it, so I do apologize for that nonsense. I believe I've got it fixed now, so once again, I simply apologize. I hope you'll bear with me. I am still very new to this whole thing. Last time, we spent a whole bunch of time looking at this screen, and I'm sure you all are sick of it now. Luckily, we won't need to come back to it until one of our research projects has completed. And we've set up a whole bunch of research projects so we can safely ignore this screen just for now. We are also, I don't know if you were watching these little pop-ups up here, but we are also now not being notified that we are wasting our leadership points. So that's one box checked. We can officially say that we have made progress. In this video, we will be discussing hopefully we'll be able to get through the rest of these screens. We kind of did a cursory glance at all of these. I hope to go into a little bit more depth right now, and when it becomes relevant, we'll go into even more depth later on. So let's start at the left, and we'll work our way over. The diplomacy screen is external affairs, so it's how your nation talking to other nations. As you can see in the last video, we decided to influence the United Kingdom away from Alaska, because we don't want Alaska to ally the United Kingdom. That would make our conquest much more difficult. And Ukraine is a little bit far out of our reach here. We want them much closer to us in terms of our faction ideology, but we decided to influence them rather than one of the countries that's more close to us, simply because these guys are probably going to drift into our faction on their own, and this guy's just going to need a little bit more help. We'll see what the other countries do. We're going to probably need to go and encourage people to head in our direction. On this screen, we can organize the countries a little bit better so that we can see like what countries are producing what and what countries need what. We can see that Alaska, which is our Comintern rival, is producing a lot of energy every day. We're producing more than them, but we are also using a lot of it to convert into our oil production. So we're going to need to hold on to that. If we need to, we can trade with Alaska to get some of their surplus energy, but I don't think that's really in our best interests. We can also see that they're actually producing a very small amount of crude oil. Now we will need to probably have an oil war here, because our crude oil production is really not that great, and that's no way to run an army. So we can simply sort by countries that produce oil, and I guess we see that oil is in really short supply just across the board. We may need to. We're actually one of the largest producers of oil. That's quite surprising. All right, so this is an oil poor game. We're going to need to maybe focus a little bit on a small but strong armored core rather than a large one. So I guess we're going to be mostly foot, mostly horse-drawn, and hopefully we can continue to increase the efficiency at which we convert coal into oil. That's probably going to be our best bet. We really don't need to worry about trade too much right now, and I honestly like to automate trade. That means that when you have spare diplomatic influence, the computer will simply take over and say, hey, you are running short on raw materials right now, I'm going to make a trade for raw materials. And I like to do that because the computer can keep track of all of these countries a heck of a lot better than I can. Looks like Tenu Tuva is really kind of hurting right now. But the computer can keep track of the surpluses and deficiencies a hell of a lot better than we can. I don't want to spend all of my time on this screen just micromanaging everything, so I like to let the computer do that. As long as you're generating a little bit more diplomatic influence than you're actually influencing people, then you're really set if you just automate the trade. This is also the screen where you can declare war. In fact, if we find the United Kingdom here, we can see exactly what's required for us to declare war. Now, one of the features of this random world is that no one can declare war until the 1st of next year. So everybody's got non-aggression pacts right now. Nobody has their army really built up beyond the starting units. So really we have a year to get ready, get prepared, plan our invasion of the United Kingdom, and plan our defense to the south and to the north, and try to consolidate our holdings up in here. But we'll discuss neutrality and relations and threat later on. But basically, our neutrality needs to be lower than their threat. In other words, we need to have a certain amount of neutrality before we can declare war. Now we're helped by the idea that we claim their territory, but neutrality is the game's way of explaining away the population's reluctance to send their warriors into battle. And we're the leader of the Allies, who are technically a democracy, so we really need to be worried about what the population thinks. Our neutrality right now is 52%. That means that 51%. That means that 51% of our population is not in support of going to war. And if we go back to the United Kingdom, we're at 51% neutrality. We need to be at 20% neutrality in order to declare war on them. Now we can modify these numbers by either increasing their threat, or random events will happen that reduce our neutrality. So in order to declare war on them and reclaim all of our lost territory, we do need to get their threat higher. That does segue rather nicely into the intelligence screen. Earlier, we set the priorities of our spies on our likely rivals being Alaska and nationalist Spain, but we do have very good spy generation. If I remember correctly, we're making one spy every 2 days. So we're going to prioritize the United Kingdom just as much as we are Alaska and nationalist Spain. And we're not going to have them do anything just yet. We'll get to that later. But what we're really going to be interested in is this option right here, increased threat. Basically, it does exactly what the tooltip there says. We will attempt to make this country seem more threatening to world peace than it currently is. Because they share a border with us, their threat will impact us greatly. And our population will see them as a country worth going to war with. Now, they're small and rather pitiful, and our spies right now, I think they only have 31 industrial capacity, that compared to our 274. So really, they aren't going to be that good of a target for us. They're not going to improve our economy that much. But what they will do is get rid of this nasty front that we have here, and make our country a much easier block to defend. I still think that's a good war, and we really don't need to worry about cores, so we don't need to worry about revolt risk, except in this small province right there. I mean, all of this land should rightfully be part of the great German democracy, right? So we're going to conquer that back, but we need to make them seem threatening to us. We're going to send the spies there. Once we have a decent amount of spies, we'll feel safe enough to actually assign them some covert missions. That's the diplomacy screen. You use the diplomacy screen also for the faction politics. Basically, it's your job to keep allies out of your opponent's factions and goad them to coming into ours. Now, there are way too many countries in the world for us to really worry about each and every one of them. We need to acknowledge that, well, some factions will ally with our rivals, but if we can steal the United Kingdom from Alaska's nose, if we can steal the United Kingdom out from under the nose of Alaska, excuse me, that sounded really weird. I think that would be a net win for us, especially if we can then take over that territory and make it into our own. Alright, so next up is the production tab. Now that's what this one is telling us. It's yelling at us because we're wasting a whole bunch of our industrial capacity. So this is the game's way of modeling factories in your country. We have 196 factories on the map. We can go and find them even. We can go back into that resources map mode and click on a green province. If we were to count all of these up, that would equal 196. But our actual number of built industrial capacity isn't our actual industrial capacity, because that's modified from the technology that we were talking about earlier, some of our laws that we'll get into, and then some miscellaneous modifiers that are given to us because of our position in the game. So we've researched technology that gives us a 7.5% bonus to our industrial capacity. And our economy is currently on a war footing, which gives us an additional 25%. So our 196 becomes 274 industrial capacity. We are heavily geared towards war production at this point. So if we go back into this production screen, we can see the different things that we need to be spending that industrial capacity on. Money is produced based on how much leadership and how much population you have. You can't increase this number in any real way other than trading with other nations. It's a flat thing. You really don't need to worry about it as long as you don't go into negative. It's really a secondary resource. Money, I mean, it should have a bigger impact on the game, but it really doesn't. We're probably going to end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time the game ends. It's really a secondary resource. What you need to worry about is energy, metal, rare materials, and to a certain extent, crude oil if you want to be doing any real armor and armor divisions, airplanes, or naval engagements. It seems like in this game it's going to be a really scarce resource, which might actually make it fun. But for each unit of base IC that you have isn't how you determine how you use your resources. For each IC you have available to you and are using, you consume 2 units of energy, 1 unit of metal, and a half unit of rare materials every day. So we have 274 factories that are currently working. We need to have half as much rare materials, as much metal, and twice as much energy as the number of factories to keep them working. So you can see we can do a decent amount of expanding here. Right away we know that we need to get more metal because our rare materials and our energy can handle more expansion than our metal can. But we can worry about that later on, further on down the line. But this is the screen where your future plans can be played out. Upgrades are obviously upgrading your existing forces with the new research that you finished already. Since we have a year before we need to worry about war, I'm just going to set that at 0. Same with our reinforcement. I'm worried more about production right now than I am about actually resupplying our existing troops. Everybody has a 1-year peace treaty with each other. We don't need to worry about it. Supplies are much the same way, but I want to make sure that we make enough supplies to actually cover our existing infantry. So I don't want our supplies to drop down to 0, because if we are attacked, I want to be able to fight immediately. And you can see how much you use every day by that 39.78 used key. So yesterday, I know yesterday didn't exist, but yesterday the game produced 309.23 supplies for us, and 296 of that went into the supply network, but our troops only used 39.78. Yesterday, only 2.7 was returned to the stockpile, but I'm willing to bet that in the next few days, or maybe even a week, a lot of that unused supply will return back to our stockpile. It's just out in limbo right now, being used to ferry supplies around by itself. We don't need to produce 300 every day. What we really only need to do is cover the used number. So we need to produce 40 or more a day. We're producing 61 a day. I think we're all set. That's all I'm going to worry about in terms of supplies right now. The supply system is really, really messy and in-depth, and it really doesn't work that well in my opinion. But we'll get more into it later. Consumer goods are your main interaction with the civilian population. Paradox has a really interesting way of dealing with civilian populations in this game. Basically, they don't exist. Paradox didn't want to model the true horrors of war in this game. You notice the German flag is not the swastika. You do play as Hitler. I mean, everything's historically accurate, but there's no death camps. There's no atrocities of war. There's no dealing with prisoners of war. There's none of the really messy stuff that you really do need to get into to understand this period of history, but that wasn't the kind of game that Paradox wanted to set out to develop. They wanted you to be able to play as Germany while they didn't want to get into the whole, you're playing as Hitler sort of thing, It's an interesting strategic game. It's not a real-life simulator. You're not going to have a little text box that pops up and asks you to do all of these really nasty things. And it's not going to pretend like these things didn't happen. It's just not within the focus, the purview of this game. So really the only interaction you have with your population is their demand for consumer goods. For every military unit that you have deployed, you need a certain amount of consumer goods to keep the population happy. When you've drafted someone or you have a standing army, you do need to dedicate your industrial capacity to producing things like microwaves and refrigerators. Otherwise, you're going to have more dissent, more unrest. As you can see, with our current investment, which is really a large investment in consumer goods, our dissent will decrease by 0.37 every day. We only have 0.12 right now, but that 0.12 currently gives us a revolt risk of plus 0.03. Now, revolt risk reduces the throughput of supplies, it reduces the effectiveness of your troops in fighting, and it increases the chance that random partisans could spawn and start an open revolt against your country. So you really want to keep an eye on your dissent. It's an all-around bad thing for your country. So you do need to make sure that you're producing as much consumer goods as your population needs, and possibly a little bit more, so that dissent can trend downward. I like making it negative 0.01 dissent, just so that, in 12 days our dissent will go away. That'll be fine. We may get a couple of random events that increase our dissent or reduce our dissent. We may have some interesting decisions to take later on in the future, but for right now I think this is A-okay. We are going to knock our supplies back down to around 60 again, because that is just an obscenely large amount of supplies. You can right-click on these slider bars to lock them in place, so that you can mess around with them. Lend-Lease we don't need to worry about quite yet. This is a way for us to send industrial capacity to our allies, a way of long-term supporting their war effort. If we don't want to get directly involved, we don't want to send German troops halfway around the world, we can still support our allies over there by giving them industrial capacity. I think it's a good way to do it. It was added, I think, in their Finest Hour expansion. But now that leaves us with 215 unused industrial capacity to make things with. Now, here you might be overwhelmed with that number and say, "Oh my goodness, how am I ever going to spend all of that? I don't know what I need in the future." Really, it's really easy to spend all of that. We can spend it on building better infrastructure, building better roads, building more factories even. You can build land forts, you can build air bases and naval bases. And I think that what's really important when you're first starting the game is to determine what your country's immediate needs are, and then what your long-term goals are. And do the immediate needs first, and then queue up the long-term goals. So right now, our immediate need is to have enough troops to conquer the United Kingdom, which shouldn't be that hard, while also dissuading all of these countries around us from attacking us. And with our rather dire oil situation, I'm thinking what we really need is a whole bunch of infantry. So we need to produce more infantry divisions. And here is where we get into spreadsheet heaven, my friends. Alright, so we go infantry, 1936, and right away what it offers us is a 3-brigade infantry regiment with these stats. We will go deeper into the depth of the statistics later on, but really what you need to be worried about is bigger numbers, smaller combat width, right? Big numbers, small combat width. That's it. So right now we see soft attack 9. That's a nice big number. Hard attack 3. It's not so spectacular. Piercing attack of 3. That's also not so spectacular. So these numbers here directly correspond with the defensiveness, the air defense, and the softness. Sorry, not the air defense, but the softness, toughness, and defensiveness of your units. So we have a soft attack of 9. Infantry has a softness of 100%. So infantry fighting another infantry will always use its soft attack against that infantry. So this 3 doesn't even get used if you're fighting other infantry. Now, if we want this regiment to be really good at fighting other infantry, we just need to add something that will give it a good soft attack. So let's sort this by soft attack. You see, infantry, rangers, cavalry, paratroopers, all of these things would be excellent at increasing the soft attack of this unit, and that's our goal. But it would also increase the combat width, which is right here of this unit. So we have a combat width of 3 right now, and if we were to add another infantry, our combat width would be 4. Yeah, that would increase our soft attack up to 12, but it would reduce the number of other regiments that could participate in the same battle. If we wanted to keep our combat width of 3, we could just add an artillery unit to this. This artillery unit also increases our soft attack up to 12, but it keeps our combat width at the same rate. So this infantry regiment is now significantly stronger, but it takes up the same amount of frontage. It takes up the same amount of width at the front lines. So we can have, let's say we're fighting a battle where the combat width was 12. We could fit 4 of these regiments in battle, each with 12 soft attack. Or we could fit 3 of these regiments with 4 combat widths in battle, each with 12 soft attack. I think in this situation it'd be much better for us to give all of our units artillery. Now that does make them a tad bit more expensive. Artillery takes 1 unit of supply every turn, whereas another infantry regiment would take 0.67 units of supply every turn. Artillery also costs much more industrial capacity, almost 7, whereas an infantry regiment only takes 3. But we are saving a little bit on manpower, so it's all about trade-offs. Really, you want to build the most powerful regiment you can for the job you want it to be doing. And if we need to attack along a wide front, we want a lot of infantry that's good at fighting a lot of other infantry. Especially with how oil-poor this map will be, we really need to focus on our infantry combat ability. So I think this is going to be a good basic template. It's not very good against tanks. That's what the heart attack is looking at. But we can't build tanks, and we're one of the larger countries. I really don't think that other countries will be able to build tanks at this point. So we're not too worried about having an anti-tank regiment in there, or even an anti-aircraft regiment in there. Mostly because we're focused on having our infantry fight other infantry. Later on, we'll be focused on having our motorized maybe fight other motorized, or our motorized fight armor. We'll have our tank brigades really focusing on taking out the enemy armors, while our infantry is really focused on taking out the enemy infantry. Or what we could do, instead of slapping an artillery unit on there, is slap an armored car regiment on here. You see, it gives the same soft attack bonus, but it also gives a piercing attack and a unit of armor to this regiment. So on top of all of this, you also need to worry about the softness of the unit. Basically, this regiment, when damage is dealt to it, when an enemy hits this unit in combat, there is an 86% chance that it will hit against its soft unit. So this unit is much better. It has an 11 soft attack against another soft unit. And attacking another regiment of this exact same composition, there would be an 86% chance that this regiment would attack with its 11 damage, rather than its 3 damage. Now, if we were to go over to a panzer unit that we can't quite build yet, this only has a softness of 43. So, an infantry unit going up against one of these units would have a much higher chance of using their heart attack rather than their soft attack. This is one reason why tanks are so good against infantry, unless you give them anti-tank, which gives them another 4 damage in terms of soft attack. So this would be a really good anti-tank unit. But, like I said, I don't think we're going to be fighting against a lot of tanks, so we're just going to focus on the artillery. We're going to build these as reserves, which means that they won't be built with full manpower. They'll be reinforced up to full once we actually mobilize our country for war. And I think we're going to start by... let's see, we have 1 year. This will get done before 1 year. We're going to dedicate 108 of our industrial capacity only to be building infantry regiments. We'll get more into these practicals. Suffice it to say, right now we're not very good at building it. We're actually spending 17.5% more time and cost building infantry, and almost 40% more time and cost building artillery, just because our country isn't geared up for that sort of thing. It's just not that good at it yet, but it'll get better as it builds more. So we're going to commit that in, and now there's all of our wonderful infantry divisions. All this +1 just means that when this is done, it'll restart it and do it one more time. Next, I think we're going to be building Interceptors, just 2 of them, so that we can get our light aircraft practical up. It's going to be rather important to have control of the skies. Even if we're not focused on bombing the enemy into submission, we're just going to want to make sure they don't do that to us. So if you do have limited resources to spend on fighters and on aircraft in general, I do recommend going with the Interceptors. It's a good way of defending yourself against the enemy. When we can build stronger planes, we'll talk more about that in depth. In terms of our Navy, I think we need to take a close look at what exactly our Navy has. Let's see, we have a battleship, we have a heavy cruiser, a light cruiser, and a bunch of submarines. Alright, we need screens. Basically, when it comes to a naval engagement, your screens keep your capital ships out of harm's way. The more screens you have, the cheaper the ships that you have, the better your capital ships will survive. That's just on an in general basis. So this fleet will not fight very efficiently because only the light cruiser will be screening both the heavy cruiser and the battleship from enemy fire. We need to get more screens, and it's okay that we don't exactly have the best tech at this point. We're just going to build some cheap destroyers. This is the G7 class of destroyer. You can decide to not give it a main armament, at which point it's just a normal G7 class. And you can see that would drop its... Actually, it doesn't seem to drop much of anything at all. It would decrease this stuff. The only tech that we've researched for our destroyers gives it a +0.5 convoy attack and +2.25 sea attack. It's really not that spectacular of an increase, but it doesn't make it cost any significant amount more. It makes it build for 2 more days. This is also something that we can get built before the end of the year. I'm going to queue up 3 of them to be built in parallel. That means they're all going to be built at the same time. It won't cost us any manpower, really, but it will tie up about 20 of our factories for basically the entire year. But I think that'd be good. It'll actually allow our fleet, such as it is, to be used. I don't think we're going to start building any real capital ships or really building up much of a fleet at all until we get some more techs in. No-tech fleets really aren't that spectacular. Once we get a little bit further into this tree and into these trees, I think we can start focusing on building more useful units. But right now, what we need is for us to get our units usable rather than tech them up. All right, so back in here, like I said earlier, we do have a significant amount of resources that aren't being used. It's just going into our stockpile and isn't being used at all. One way to change that, really, is to build more factories. Unfortunately, these won't be built before the end of the year. So it's a long-term investment. And this is for only one. This is for an increase of 1 industrial capacity. It's almost not worth it. In fact, it would probably be easier to take over the United Kingdom, steal basically all of their factories, than it would be to build however many factories they have on our own. Let's see, our spies say that they have 25 factories right now. For us to build 25 factories would require us, I mean, let's do five times over. It would require us tying up 27 of our factories for 65 months. It is much better for us to simply increase our economy through conquest rather than the building of industrial capacity. We may end up building IC later on. I don't think that it's in our best interests right now. So that still leaves us with 57 unused industrial capacity. We're expanding our army, we're expanding our air force, and we're expanding our navy. One thing that we will need in the future is support regiments for our starting infantry. These are not very well balanced, they're not very well supported. I mean, it's what we just talked about. These will have a combat with the 4 and the same soft attack as if we dropped the combat width down to 3 and added an artillery regiment in there instead. So I do think that that's going to be beneficial for us. The problem is we don't know exactly how many of those support regiments we're going to need. One thing that we can do is wait until they all get in here. We'll divide all of these regiments into regiments of just 3 brigades of infantry each. We'll see how many brigades of 3 infantry each we can make, and then we'll build that many artillery and attach them to those regiments. That's the easiest way to do it. We do have light armor that is unfortunately attached to infantry. Now this really isn't that good, and unfortunately I can't show you why, because we can't build light armor yet, so I can't show you this stat box for that regiment. But basically light armor's sole purpose is to rush in. It's to the infantry is there to hold down the line. The light armor is there to run in, get around back, and cut them off, maybe surround them completely, and force them to surrender. By pairing them with infantry, you take away all of those advantages from the light armor. The max speed of this light tank is 8 kilometers per hour. The max speed of an infantry unit is 4. So we're hobbling these light tanks by attaching them to the same unit as infantry. So what we really need is some faster units that we can put with our existing light tanks. And I know it's 1936. This is World War II. But that's where cavalry regiments come in. It really is. These guys are not meant to be stand up and fight troops. They're meant to get somewhere quick and hold the line until the real get up and fight troops arrive. So I think 2 brigades of cavalry, and we'll probably end up doing. Here, let's just create a new template. We'll do 2 brigades of cavalry, and let's do an armored car. They all can, cavalry can travel at 5, which does mean that we're going to be slowing down the light tanks, but not near as much as if we were assigning infantry to them. And we can upgrade our cavalry into motorized regiments later. We'll just do this. We'll have 2 brigades of cavalry and an armored car unit for support per light tank regiment division that we have on the field. So we have 2 light armor here. Let's see, we have 2 light armor, that's the original one. 2 light armor there, 1 light armor there, and that looks to be it. So, simple matter. Do this. 3. Boom. We'll save that template, and boom. So now we've got these motorized, I suppose, cavalry regiments being built, and we'll attach the light tank brigades to them, give them a little bit more stopping power. And we still do have 30 industrial capacity. One thing we can do, because this is really in a disadvantageous position, and it is gaining us a lot of resources, I think what this needs is a couple of forts. we don't have that many troops down here. It has a naval base and an air base. This is really a good location for us. It allows us to project our power basically everywhere in the Mediterranean, but it's isolated. It's out on its own. If we are attacked down here, it'll be a long time before we travel all the way around here just to get reinforcements. So a few land forts. We'll also do a couple coastal forts just to stave off any invasions. Corinthos and Patra. No, I think we just focus on this one. So we've got a little bit there. Let's actually pop into diplomatic map mode, see if we can see any more green on the map. Maybe we have more colonies, possibly outside of Greece. Oh, look. Oh, look. Okay, this island is useless to us, except as a base for moving on to somewhere else. And this little enclave here is also useless to us. It gives us no manpower, no leadership, no resources, nothing. We could turn them into fortresses, places from which to launch our invasion of, say, holy cow, Australia, which controls most of South America, into Central America, up through North America. I mean, Australia is going to be a beast to take on. But in the meantime, if we just don't cause trouble over here, I don't think we'll have that much of a problem. Alright, back into the diplomatic map mode. Let's see if we have any more colonies. Oh, look! Another colony. Victoria Island. Is this Victoria Island? I honestly don't know what island this is. It's up by Seattle. It's looking like it's another entirely useless one. Yep, useless. Let's not waste our country's resources on this island. Once again, it would be a good way to launch an invasion over here, but it's not worth investing on when we have so many cores at home to take over. Like, just look at how big our country can be without any negative penalties whatsoever. Where over here, like, we have nowhere to expand over here in terms of cores. We have a few cores down here. We can take over a significant chunk of this southern South America, but it's really not worth our time when we can be focused much closer to home. Nothing in Asia, it looks like. It looks like our colonial days are over. Nothing in India. Yeah, it's just the Greek colony. Alright. So, at this point, I suppose we're just going to, well, let's talk about Rangers. Let's talk about special units. All of these special units are based off of a percentage of your army. So, well, let's just try stuff right now. We'll have one Ranger in this regiment, and let's increase until it tells us we can't actually... Well, I guess there's a minimum of 2. Let's put an artillery regiment in it. And let's increase this until this button's grayed out, which is basically telling us that we can't build any more. There we go. We have 6 Ranger brigades that are allowed. What that's basically telling us is these are special forces. You don't have a big enough army to support more than 6 Rangers. So we're going to build 2 regiments of 3 Rangers each. And, I mean, these are special forces. I'm really not entirely sure what the best... How about we send these guys against the enemy tanks? That'll be the special forces job. If we see enemy tanks, we'll deploy these guys to the front line right there, and hopefully a high piercing attack, high hard attack will allow them to take out the tanks, and our infantry can be focused elsewhere. So we'll have these guys. We're not going to build these guys as reserves. These guys are our elite. We're going to pop them into the production queue, and there we go. We have our production queue done. Alright, I'm going to call this video here. Thanks for sticking with me through this. We're going to look at this politics screen in more depth next time. It's not going to be too difficult. We'll refer back to this when we need to change our laws. Hopefully, this is helping. I really, really hope that this is helping somebody who maybe wants to try Hearts of Iron 3. because Hearts of Iron 4 is coming out, or who has tried Hearts of Iron 3 and just couldn't get into it because everything is really a brick wall. You need to pound your head against the brick wall to get to the fun game underneath. I really hope they do an excellent job with Hearts of Iron 4, but that doesn't mean that you can't get any enjoyment out of this game. Just you need to stick with the learning curve and accept that, you know, not everything deserves really 100% of your attention. Sometimes if you just don't understand something, feel free to click this button right here and switch something over to AI control. If you really don't want to worry about this screen, just let the AI control it. I'm just here to explain things to you, maybe help you have a little bit more fun with the game. Well, once again, everybody, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. I hope you all have a fun time with this game. And hey, we might actually be able to click the unpause button next video. So thank you much, have a good one.